Every empire believes it is eternal. Every civilization looks at its walls and thinks these will never fall. Rome was no different. For 8 centuries, it had been the center of the known world. Its road stretched to Scotland. Its laws governed Egypt. Its name alone could stop an army. And then, on a September evening in 476 AD, it was over, not with a bang, not with fire from the heavens, but quietly, almost politely. Like a candle being pinched out in the dark. To understand the night Rome fell, you must first understand what Rome had become and what it had lost. At its height, the Roman Empire held 70 million people. 1 in 4 humans alive on Earth lived under the eagle. But by the 5th century, the empire had split in 2 east and west. Constantinople thrived in the east, rich and fortified. But the west was bleeding. Decades of civil war had hollowed it out. Emperors rose and fell like seasons. 21 emperors in under a century. The treasury was empty. The borders were porous. And the Roman legions? Half of them weren't even Roman anymore. Rome had begun hiring the very people it once conquered to defend itself. The Visigoths, the Vandals. The Huns pressed at the gates, and inside the palace, a boy sat on the throne. His name was Romulus Augustulus. He was 16 years old. The name was almost poetic in its cruelty. Romulus, the name of Rome's mythical founder. Augustus, the title of its greatest emperor. And yet this boy was neither founder nor great. He was a puppet, placed on the throne by his father, a military general named Orestes, who pulled every string from behind the curtain. Romulus had never won a battle. He had never addressed the Senate. He had barely left the palace. And yet, on paper, he was the ruler of the Roman Empire. History has a dark sense of humor. That warlord's name was Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain, a man who had risen through the ranks of the Roman military, serving Rome, learning Rome, all while waiting for the right moment. In the summer of 476, that moment arrived. The final crisis began with a demand. The Germanic foederati, mercenaries who made up the backbone of Rome's remaining army, marched to Orestes with a simple request: land. 1/3 of Italy, the same deal Rome had offered barbarian soldiers everywhere else in the crumbling empire. Orestes refused. It was the last mistake he would ever make. Within weeks, Odoacer raised his standard. The soldiers, Rome's own soldiers, defected to him almost overnight. Orestes fled. He was captured near Pavia and executed without ceremony. Now there was nothing between Odoacer and the boy on the throne. On the 4th of September, 476 AD, Odoacer's forces entered Ravenna. There was no siege, no last stand. The gates opened. The soldiers walked in, and Romulus Augustulus, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, was brought before the man who had just ended a civilization. What happened next was not what you might expect. Odoacer looked at the boy, 16 years old, trembling, dressed in imperial purple that suddenly seemed absurd on his thin shoulders. And Odoacer let him live. Perhaps it was pity. Perhaps the boy was simply too irrelevant to kill. Romulus was stripped of his title, stripped of his treasury, and sent into exile to a castle in Campania in southern Italy. He was given a pension, a comfortable prison with a view of the sea. The last emperor of Rome did not die by the sword. He faded into obscurity. History isn't even sure when he died. Odoacer did something extraordinary after his victory. He did not declare himself emperor of Rome. Instead, he sent the imperial insignia, the crown, the robes, the symbols of Western power, to Constantinople, to the Eastern Emperor Zeno, with a message that said, essentially, there is only one empire now. You don't need 2 emperors. It was a political masterstroke. Odoacer ruled Italy as a king under the nominal authority of the East. He kept Roman laws. He kept Roman administrators. He kept the Senate. In many ways, Rome didn't end that night. It simply changed management, and yet something had broken. Something irreplaceable. The idea of Rome. The dream that had held the Western world together for 5 centuries. That idea died on September 4th, 4076. Historians still argue about whether Rome truly fell that night. Some say it had been dying for a century. Some say the Eastern Empire continued for another 1,000 years. And they're right. Constantinople wouldn't fall until 1453, but something ended in 476. The West went dark. The roads stopped being maintained. Trade collapsed. Literacy fell. Cities shrank. Europe entered what we call the Dark Ages. Not overnight, but the fall of Rome was the moment the light began to go out. It took centuries to rebuild what was lost. The Renaissance, 1,000 years later, was quite literally named after the attempt to be reborn from Rome's ashes. And all of it traces back to one September evening. A teenage boy walking away from a throne, a barbarian king who didn't even want the crown, and an empire that had forgotten what made it great. Rome fell not because it was defeated. It fell because it stopped believing in itself. The soldiers stopped fighting for Rome. The emperors stopped governing for Rome. The people stopped sacrificing for Rome. And in the end, the greatest empire the world had ever seen was ended not by an invading horde, but by a quiet decision made by a tired people to simply stop. Some say history repeats itself. Let's hope they're wrong.